Good evening, fledglings. Me and Min, you can't see Min, but she's here. We're here to take you back to the House of Night. I've not got the books. I have actually got physical copies of these books that I'm going to talk about today. Not got them. No one cares. Mace, I'm having a rough time recently. I just feel like, you know what would make me feel better? Ripping the piss out of somebody else's book. So if you remember last time, we only covered the first two books in the House of Night series. Basically, Zoe just got turned into a vampire fledgling, took over the Dark Daughters. She's currently got a fledgling boyfriend and a human boyfriend, and she's flirting with a teacher. So that's where we're at with that right now. Really, you don't need any more context than that. So we begin with Chosen. Zoe's birthday is in December at some point. She's a Capricorn. The fact that her birthday is at this time annoys her because everybody always tries to like mush her birthday with Christmas. She calls it Birthmas. Yes, that is vaguely annoying. The thing is she doesn't tell any of her friends that this is something that makes her uncomfortable. Obviously all of her friends try to mash her birthday with Christmas and they get her like snowman themed gifts. While Zoe's opening these gifts and pretending to be grateful for them, she actually gets a gift from Heath, her human boyfriend, who sends her something completely non-Christmas related, and also a card that talks directly about how much Christmas related gifts annoy Zoe. All of her friends obviously see this card and get angry with her. And I suppose it's an attempt by the author to, reintroduce the minutiae of Zoe's life and the high school drama that is at the base of this. But the whole thing just comes off as really annoying because like it's easily solved in the fact that like Zoe could just tell people that she doesn't want her birthday to be mashed with Christmas, and then nobody would do that. Also, the worst part is all her friends end up like having a go at her because they've obviously bought her these gifts and she doesn't appreciate them basically. And Zoe turns around and throws the fact that Stevie Ray is dead in their faces. She's basically like, oh, I'm having a really hard time recently because Stevie Ray's died. And it's like, okay, here's the fact, Zoe Bird. You know that Stevie Ray is not actually dead, she's undead. You've seen her undead. So I know that you're stressed about that and that's what you really mean. But it's kind of still better than her being dead, right? These guys still think she's dead. So you have no right to throw that fact in their faces, especially when they knew Stevie Ray before you. Like, these guys were all friends before Zoe came to the school. And all of a sudden she's acting like she's the only one who's got any kind of claim on Stevie Ray. And nobody else has any right to be sad at all. Anyway, Zoe goes to meet her grandmother to exchange birthday gifts. Her mum shows up and it turns out that she's only come there to like bring her husband so they can like spout Christian shite at Zoe. So this is a good time to mention that the people of faith whom Zoe's stepdad is a part of are just like a kind of stand-in for Christians in these books, but like not even like this nuanced kind of look at Christians, just like the people of faith represent everything bad about Christianity. Like they don't like the vampires first of all, but they also don't like gay people or just anybody who's different, really. Good if at some point throughout the series it was explored that, some of the people who belonged to the people of faith weren't that bad. It's just that the organization they belonged to wasn't that great. But nah, there was none of that kind of nuance in this book. There are other sectors of Christianity, which we'll get to in a little bit. But to have it as blatant as different sectors being good or bad, like depending, is just a little bit too black and white of a world to really be representative of what the real world is like. And so then this whole kind of meta idea of like breaking down racism that like the cast duo thought they had going on here, it just doesn't work. Zoe comes back to the House of Night and she runs into Loren, the teacher who she's been flirting with, and he gives her a birthday gift of some description. I think it's earrings, and he kisses her. Now we've gone from this like weird little fun fantasy world of there's like a young student teacher guy in the building and he's vaguely flirtatious towards me, which is fun, to full on we've been nonced. I don't like this. I think when I was younger, I did kind of like the Loren romance, but that's only because I found both the relationships with Heath and Eric really unbelievable. The Eric thing I'll get into in a minute. Heath I may as well explain now. Obviously, there's an issue with introducing a love interest whom the main character has already known for quite some time because they already have an established relationship and the getting to know is the fun bit to read about. So a lot of the time you kind of don't root for the old boyfriend so much, but I think that because over the course of the series we do get a lot of time to get to know Heath, that's not as much of an issue as we go on in the story, but it is still kind of an issue with these earlier books. I don't think that we spend enough time with Eric to really form an opinion on him here. and Zoe and Heath's relationship is already so close, and like the cast duo don't do enough explaining about it. Like, we don't get any context or background for the relationship. It's just, oh, Heath's my boyfriend and he basically has been since I was 9 or whatever. Don't really know how they met or anything yet. There's nothing for us to hold on to that we can like relate to that we would enjoy in a real relationship, right? Remember Loren being appealing for that reason, in that he was like the most interesting guy, and he and Zoe actually had these flirtatious interactions that had like chemistry and stuff. So it was just the romance that was working the best. And when you considered the fact that it was a student teacher romance, it's just kind of gross, right? Now that Stevie Ray is dead, Aphrodite conveniently turns out to have an earth affinity. It's established at the beginning that like a high priestess's ritual circle is like this sacred thing, and the fact that all Zoe's friends have their unique affinities for the elements that fit in the circle is like really bizarre. It happens quite early on with Aphrodite, and you think that maybe, okay, Aphrodite's special, and that kind of continues to be the theme. But again, as the series goes along, this preordained rule that the cast duo have set out for themselves just gets broken down. Eventually, like, everybody's just swapping and changing affinities. Somebody dies, somebody new who's just come into the book magically has their affinity, and they can just replace them and it's fine. I think affinities are like treated as kind of a rare thing at the beginning of the series as well. Like, not many people are supposed to have them, or they're not supposed to be very powerful if they do. But then as we get into the later part of the series, it just seems like every fledgling that we're introduced to has this random mad ability. And I understand that, you know, Nyx, the goddess, probably felt the need to, you know, build a little bit of an army, considering what's going to happen later on in the series and how she's supposedly all-knowing and shit like that. But for every single fledgling to suddenly have an affinity when, you know, in the past it's just been the rare one, it's a little bit unfair, right? Zoe goes to find Stevie Ray, and Stevie Ray is feeding off the homeless people in the streets. So Zoe like rescues her and takes her to Aphrodite's parents' place to live in like the servants' quarters or something. Back to the school, they find out that one of the professors has been killed, and she's been put up in like a crucifixion pose. It's very similar to a card that Zoe received from her parents back at Christmas time. So Zoe very strongly suspects that the people of faith have committed this murder, okay? Everett, the high priestess of the school, puts a barrier up around the school, you know, for a little bit of protection. This council meeting, like they did in the last one where Stevie Ray died, and Eric starts like crying out in pain, and Zoe thinks he's gonna die, right? But it turns out that Eric's making the change into a full vampire. And I actually think that this is a really good twist. Like, obviously, we've seen like 3 or 4 fledglings die in the previous books, and when Eric reacts this way, we obviously think that he's gonna die, just like Zoe does. Would have been a really bold move to kill off what is the main love interest at this point, but like this was kind of just as good, I'm not gonna lie. So Eric's a full vampire now, and you know, Zoe doesn't know how that's gonna affect their relationship and stuff. So she does what's only natural, and goes and sleeps with Loren, the teacher. Like, it's weird, like this book comes across like it's meant to be Zoe's like flirtation with villainy, and like really all she's done is keep a few secrets from her friends. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Even if it was really annoying that she kept the birth miss thing to herself, it's not that deep, guys. She kind of has these like inner thoughts about how she's like flirting with darkness and stuff like that, and it's like you're really just not doing anything too heavy here. Even the thing with Loren, the cheating on your boyfriend thing, is like you're kind of being groomed a little bit, girl. In fact, she was being groomed a lot of it, but we'll get to that in a minute, because I need to tell you about what happens immediately after they sleep together, which is that Eric, her obviously newly vampire boyfriend, sees them together. He runs and tells all the mates, like the little grass that he is, right? And they're all mad because she didn't tell them that she had something going on with Loren, which is like, it's not really any of your business, to be honest. All she did was not tell you that someone was flirting with her. Like, is that a big deal? No. It's so, like, this is what the whole book has been about. This is it. Like, Zoe has been keeping this one secret and the fucking birthmas thing from her friends. And this is a big deal, apparently. This required an entire book. Anyway, so the end of it, this is going to sound a little bit complicated, right? Oh my god, I didn't even tell you the worst bit. Oh my gosh. So when Zoe, I'm spilling the tea right now. When Zoe slept with Loren, she also drank from him, which means that she broke the imprint that she had with Heath. So that means that it caused Heath like a lot of pain. Now the connection that they had, that meant that she could like remote view him, That's gone now, okay? So she's been effectively cut off now from all of her friends, from Eric and from Heath, okay? Something weird happens, like Zoe gets like weird random pain and she feels like she's dying, and then all of a sudden it's done. And then they find out that this is because Lauren has been killed, like Professor Nolan got killed earlier, right? So now we think that the people of faith are just straight up coming out and being Buffy the Vampire Slayer over here. So right before he died, Zoe went back to him for like comfort after she fell out with all her friends, and she found him in bed with Neferit talking about how they'd like groomed her and tricked her into being isolated from all of her friends. So I really don't want to say bitch got what was coming to her, but so because Loren has been killed, Neferit declares war on humans with no evidence, might I just tell you. Yeah, she declares this war. Zoe had left her phone in Loren's room, and they had texted Stevie Ray telling her to come to the school. So all of her friends are even more mad because she didn't tell them about Stevie Ray, and they went on letting her think that she was dead. And then the book ends with Stevie Ray drinking from Aphrodite, and Aphrodite becomes human, and Stevie Ray becomes a full vampire, but she's like still like her mark is still red, so she's like a different kind of vampire now, and that's like the whole book. That whole thing really was just actually about Zoe's birthday and sleeping with a teacher. An entire book was about that. And like I actually spent time reading this. We've just spent time talking about this. Oh my god. What are my notes for this? So I want to talk about Eric now. Like I'm in therapy. Now I want to talk about Eric. So Eric, even at the beginning, before this book, the relationship with Eric wasn't believable. This is because we never see him and Zoe together. Like I said, it wasn't insta love, and you can believe that they're two teenagers who are just attracted to each other, but that's as far as it goes for like 3 whole books. Like they never have a scene together. Zoe's usually trying to concentrate on something else and talking about how she'll have time for a boyfriend later, so just don't be his girlfriend then. And there's obviously the whole thing with Heath. Zoe obviously has a lot more chemistry with Heath. It's just that we can't kind of get behind that chemistry because we don't know the context of their relationship. So that relationship not only works better, but it also just kind of makes Eric irrelevant, because when you take into account that I'm pretty sure Zoe told Heath that she still loved him at the end of the last book, like there's no need for Eric to be there because Heath and Zoe have been together for so long that the only reason Zoe even thinks that Eric is a viable choice anymore is because they're both vampires and Heath is a human. But it's already been established that vampires can be with humans and there's nothing wrong with that. So I don't understand if she thinks it's such a big deal to be having all these boyfriends. Why doesn't she just get rid of one? If you're gonna do it, do it. But if you're gonna complain about it the whole time, just don't do it. There's a couple of scenes where Zoe throws the whole blowjob thing in Eric's face. Obviously, the way that we met both Eric and Aphrodite was trying to give Eric a blowjob. Yes, this is assault. No, the book does not treat it as one, so I'm not going to either for the sake of not mentioning it every time I say it. Zoe doesn't want to get too close with Eric because she's worried that he's going to think she's like Aphrodite and want her to give him a blowjob, I guess. Which, you know, it's not exactly the worst thing in the world, and also just saying no. It's not a big deal. But whatever, she's a teenager, maybe she's scared, I don't know, maybe I'm being too fucking harsh. It's the fact that, like, she didn't see Eric receiving a blowjob from Aphrodite. She didn't see Eric asking Aphrodite for a blowjob. She saw Eric rejecting a blowjob from Aphrodite. So I don't understand why she's gotten this impression that he's gonna want one from her. He's obviously not too bothered if he can like reject his ex-girlfriend who he's got this history with before he even knew you. Do you know what I mean? Like if he actually likes you and stuff, that's not going to be an issue. And also if we do take into account the fact that it is assault, she's just blatantly throwing Eric's sexual assault in his face and saying, listen, I'm not like that, okay? Now fuck off and do your drama shit and leave me alone, Cullen boy. In all, like Eric is just treated as this like clingy guy who like wants to be around Zoe all the time and is like stifling her as a high priestess. But in reality, he's just a teenage boy who wants to get to know his new girlfriend and spend a little bit of time with her because it's been like, what, 2-3 months? And they haven't been on one date. The last note that I have for Chosen is there was one incident in the middle of the book that I didn't mention, right? And it kind of links into this whole Zoe's in her villain phase notes that I had earlier, right? Zoe and Heath are kissing in a park and it's getting kind of hot and heavy, and then these 2 guys come over and they're kind of wolf whistling and hassling him a little bit, and Zoe turns around and she uses her powers over the elements to push these 2 guys into the streets where they then get hit by a truck. Presumably they're dead. He's never referred back to like ever again, and the only comment that Heath has to make about the whole thing is, that was me and Zoe. Don't be mean. Heath, I know you're thick, but Jesus Christ. Zoe feels bad, but not to the point of like turning herself into the police or going to check if the guys are okay, if they even made it. She never faces any consequences, and it's just not a good look for your main character, is it? To have her kill off these two guys just in a fit of passion because they interrupted her makeout session with her boyfriend. To just carry on as normal, as if she's a good person after that, and it was just a little silly mistake. Does anybody else find this strange? Oh, that's all of my notes for choosing. I'm taking a break, me lad. Oh, I probably just smudged my... God, you can't even see it. Oh no, it's okay. Yeah, the break lasted 4 days. I would never trick you into a false sense of continuity, and that's why we're in the office today. Just, I don't know, it was my friend's birthday. Everybody else went to the pub. I didn't get to go to the pub, I was working. I went to the house party afterwards though. So then obviously I was hungover on Sunday, just watching Trailer Park Boys in bed. Then I've just not been asked, really. I've had a bit of personal trauma today. Nothing special. Just my ex-boyfriend uploaded a picture and he looked really fit. I'm back, I'm here, and I'm ready to talk about Untamed. Do you want to know something that I noticed about Chosen? Do you remember how in Betrayed, the second book, at the end, Nefra had been like revealed to be this big villain, and her and Zoe were like open enemies towards each other? And it was like, wow, you've moved the narrative along so quickly within 2 books. Like, how are you going to pace this out in the next books? And it's like the way that the cast duo chose to fix that was just have Neferit not do anything throughout the entirety of Chosen. So at the end of Chosen, Aphrodite became human and like ran away from the school with Stevie Ray, and she comes back and she's got a mark on her forehead, but it turns out to be makeup. So Aphrodite's still human, but she does still get visions from Nick, so she's obviously not a normal human. I think at some point Aphrodite would, get her vampirism back so that she could fit in with all of her friends who are gonna live for thousands of years. But spoiler alert, she just fucking doesn't. Aphrodite is just human forever, and she's the one who like hates humans the most. And I understand that maybe like it's kind of like a punishment for her in a way, and it's apt. But it happens so early on. It's like we just don't care enough for it to really come off as this big lesson for her because we're just all so used to it by the end of the series. So when Aphrodite comes back, all Zoe's friends are still mad at her because like of the Lorenz stuff. Then Zoe gets attacked by like some invisible evil thing with claws. That's pretty much as descriptive as the book gets with it, so that's as descriptive as I'm gonna get. Basically, she just explains that she's been attacked by some invisible evil to her friends, and then they all just instantly forgive her. They are kind of like, oh, well, we'll forgive you for the sake of protecting you, but like then it just never gets mentioned that they're mad again. So, problem solved, I guess. This vampire high priestess called Shekinah turns up, who's apparently from the High Council of Vampires that we've never heard of before now. She like puts a stop to this war on humans that never started, that Neferet declared at the end of the last book. I don't know whether it's ever confirmed that Neferet was the one killing the vampire professors in order to start this war on humans. Just a footnote in the greater plot of the series, if you could call it that, so it's just really not even worth a mention here. The book itself is not bothered about clearing up plot holes and shit like that and loose ends, so I don't know why I am, but I am. Oh man. Wait, this bit already. Where's the book? I feel like I need to hold the book for this bit, because this bit has pinged me from like teenhood, right? Where's the book? Show me the book. Here it is. Here's the motherfucker, right? Untamed, everyone. I'd have a physical copy of this one. Coffee. In this book, we are introduced to the character James Stark, known primarily by his last name, Stark. It transfers him over from a different House of Night, I think a House of Night in like Chicago or something. God knows why I remember that. It's because he's got like this amazing skill with a bow and arrow where like no matter what he aims for, he can't miss. But it's almost got this like old magic quality where it's like if he's not thinking very specifically of what he's aiming for, then the arrow might go somewhere more metaphorical. And he actually ended up killing his old mentor this way. So this kid's got a tragic backstory, and he's a little bit of a bad boy because he brings a dog to the House of Night instead of a cat, and the dog just fucks up everybody's cats for a little bit. It's pretty cool. Stark comes into the House of Night and is introduced to Zoe, and Zoe doesn't really have any kind of a reaction to him. She doesn't have any other interactions with him until a little bit later on in the book when she encounters him in the field house and he tells her this tragic backstory. Immediately after telling her this, Stark dies. Okay, right. Zoe thinks obviously like he might come back like Stevie Ray has and stuff like that. So they actually set up a nanny cam to watch his body. That's not what I'm talking about here. After Stark is dead, Zoe all of a sudden becomes under this like mad impression that they had this connection and that she was in love with him. I actually shit you not, like when they were first introduced, she was like, a guy. Like as soon as the guy was dead, she was like, my love, when will I see you again? It was as if she does this complete 180 as soon as she can't have him anymore. It's crazy. It's almost as if the cast duo, they didn't want it to be insta love between Stark and Zoe, so they wanted them to like have a little bit of interaction first. But like it's just insta love anyway, but it's just does it makes even less sense because like instead of just it being this ancient idea of they set eyes on each other and they love each other, they set eyes on each other and they don't think much of each other, and then randomly one day Zoe just decides that they're in love. Just yet another underdeveloped romance to add to the pile. It's like Loren died in the last book, so we had to introduce another guy into the mix. The thing that always annoyed me about this particular romance is that Stark seems like a really interesting character, and like he was like the type of boy that I wanted to read about, like this kind of bad boy type that we hadn't really got in the series before. I was really excited to hear how this relationship developed because obviously I knew Zoe was going to be involved with him because she's been involved with every other man in the goddamn book. It's this case again of like, it feels like PC Cast or whoever, they have this idea for where the series is going to go and they start to introduce the idea and it's a good idea, but they just can't wait to get to the punchline and they rush us into it and it just ends up meaningless to us. So one of Zoe's new rules as leader of the Dark Daughters was to get the House of Night involved in some local charities, ads on street cats, because obviously vampires and cats, they have this connection. Street casts. Oh my god, what is wrong with me tonight? Girls, it's getting serious. I can't speak. Street Cats is like the first attempt by this series to like make some nuanced observations about religion and about, you know, people not being as bad as you think they are or whatever, because obviously Zoe's got this like predetermined notion of what religious people are like in her head because of her stepdad. When she finds out the Street Cats is run by nuns, she's a little bit nervous because she thinks that they're going to be all judgy. All the nuns are just really great people and they don't care that Zoe's a vampire as long as she works hard. It is good. It is a nice attempt at like an exploration into a deeper subject, but it's still just not nuanced enough. As I said earlier, it's not as black and white as this sector of this religion is good, but this sector of the same religion is bad. It's not like that. Like people are individually different, right? And we all understand that. And teenagers who this book is aimed at probably understand that as well. So it's not really teaching them anything new. Okay, so oh my god, I hate this book, right? This is why I need to hold it because like this, there are so many things about this book that I'm like, wow. On the way back from Street Cats, Zoe went with Aphrodite. Aphrodite adopted a cat, which was nice. They run into Heath, right? Zoe's human boyfriend. And if you remember, she imprinted with Loren and this caused Heath like a lot of pain. After that happened, she just didn't contact Heath at all. And like when she runs into Heath, like Heath is like stunned and he like runs over to her and he's like, is everything okay? He's like, I thought you were dead. Apparently he like got flashes of her and this guy together and like Heath is like Zoe's boyfriend of like many years who she's grown up with, and like I guess he probably always had this preconceived notion in his head that they were going to lose their virginity together, right? So just like imagine the pain that Heath probably went through while Zoe was like shagging this teacher, yeah, and he could just see it. Oh my god, Zoe is a total bitch and I hate her. You do get to know Heath a lot better, and I feel like Heath is probably one of my favorite characters in the whole. Him and Aphrodite are like the two best characters for me personally. This is probably the scene where I first began to really like Heath because Zoe has just been so dismissive of him throughout the first couple of books, right? Even though they've got this connection, she's constantly trying to break it off with him, even before she becomes a vampire. And then she gets Eric as a boyfriend, and even when she admits she's still got feelings for Heath, she won't break it off with Eric. And then she's also got this thing going on with Loren, and she does this horrible thing to Heath, and she doesn't even like think to call him just to like see if he's okay, because she knows that breaking the imprint probably caused him a fair bit of pain, and she's just like, nah, I don't care, I'm gonna go and fucking help the street cats, I guess. She was constantly ragging on Heath about like the fact that he was always drinking, and it's like, he's a teenage boy, he's gonna experiment with drink. She has a go at him for trying a bit of weed like it's a big fucking deal, but then she's drinking wine at every fucking full moon ritual and whenever else she gets the goddamn chance. In fact, speaking about that, like she was always ragging on him for the beer and stuff, and she only really started to like him when the imprint changed him. Imprint does change Heath, like he stops drinking and he becomes like a lot more of an upstanding individual, and it's almost like She's like hypnotized him with this bloodlust in a way. You only like him when this like physiological change inside of him made him different. So do you even really like him in the first place, Zoe? All right, give Heath to me. I'll have him. I can be my son, okay? He's 17. Aphrodite has a vision about Zoe's grandma, and Zoe's grandma is writing a poem. And when Aphrodite comes out of the vision, she's written the poem. And the poem is really cryptic, and they ask the grandma about it, and she explains this old legend about this guy Colonna. Colonna's like this ancient god guy who came down to earth and like fucked with a bunch of women and made a load of weird babies before he got trapped in the earth by some wise women who made like this perfect woman out of stone who like enticed him into the earth and then like enclosed herself around him. It's a pretty sick legend and a much better story than this. After this, Grandma gets attacked on her way to the school by like one of those invisible evil claw things that Zoe got attacked by at the beginning of the book. She ends up in like intensive care. It's all very dramatic actually, because to be fair, Grandma Redbird is a very sweet old lady who is not to blame for like the obsolescent mysticism trope that has been placed upon her as a Cherokee woman. I don't want to delve into that right now. I don't want to do it. You can see why, but I will mention it. I'll get you my final thoughts. I'll try and get some kind of cognizant thing together to talk about Grandma Redbird and her whole deal. Anyway, she is a character that we have known from the beginning and who has had quite a fair bit of development, and so if you've read this far into the series, you probably do have some kind of an attachment to her. So her being injured and possibly in peril is actually, you know, kind of an involving thing like going on. My friend has just texted me telling me to text her boyfriend and threaten him. I'm not threatening your boyfriend for you. An homage. Yeah. Can I put that in? Is that embarrassing? An homage, yeah. Look at the fucking state of them. I'm gonna ignore that for now and carry on with what I was saying. What was I saying? At this point, we know that Nefra is doing something to resurrect these fledglings, and so she resurrects this Stark guy. Of the prophecy to release this Colonna guy is choosing Stevie Ray, the place where he was buried, which just so happens to be on the House of Night grounds, which is why Nefra wanted to buy the House of Night, though, in the first place. Shock horror. She undead Stark in order to shoot Stevie Ray there, right? And so they release this Colonna into the world. We're on book 4, and we've already broke the immortal out of the ground. So you can see that the pacing problem has been solved, okay? We're fine with the pacing thing now. We've learned how to do that. We've got that down. My notes say it's like they realized that they were going too fast when Neferet declared war on humans. So they brought in Shekinah at the beginning of this book to kind of slow things down a little bit and get a little bit of authority going so they could like build up a little bit more suspense. And then they just broke the immortal out of the earth at the end of the book. Oh, Jesus. So, yeah, Colonna's out. He kills Shekinah, so she was pointless. And there's a lot of chaos, and our main gang, manages to escape, and they take Stevie Ray with them. So, like, likelihood is she's not going to die again. And that's the end of book 4. Eric has, he's become a full vampire. The drama teacher got killed in the last book, so he stays on as the new drama teacher because he was the little drama boy. Weird flirty scenes, if you can call them that, with Eric and Zoe. And so there are hints here that romance is going to make a comeback at some point in the series. General feel of the book is that, like, Eric should just, like, forgive Zoe for what she's done because, like, obviously, like, Loren was using Zoe. But as much as Zoe is not to blame for all of that, she still did have a responsibility not to cheat on her boyfriend. And I feel like Eric is very much allowed to be mad at her for doing that. He can still feel bad and he can still even support her and be there for her as a friend if he feels comfortable doing that. But at the end of the day, he's been betrayed by somebody who he trusted, and he doesn't have to forgive you for shit, Zoe. In this book, it just feels like Eric's kind of being painted to be a bit of a dick for being angry at Zoe. And I feel like Eric has every right to be mad. How do you feel? I belong on kids' television, not YouTube. I swear too much to be on kids' television. Plus, Zoe was a bad girlfriend anyway. I don't understand, like, why Eric would want to get back with her anyway. Like, even if he does forgive her, like, there's no reason for us to think that this romance should continue because Eric and Zoe spent no time together, and Zoe didn't ever want to spend time. He offered to take her on dates and shit, and she was always like, no, I'm too busy doing my Cherokee shit. I don't know. There was the whole Heath thing with whom she has more chemistry, and Lorraine thing with whom she has more chemistry. So it's just, the romance is dead, okay? You've effectively ended the romance in the last book. There's no need for you to do this. Maybe the nice thing to do with the most moral lessons to be learned would be to just have Eric and Zoe slowly become friends now throughout the course of the series. Maybe have a little bit of an enemies thing going on at the beginning, and then Eric comes around for the great good at the end when there's a big fat evil immortal broken out of the earth to beat, you know what I mean? There are a lot of unexplored avenues with Eric. There are a lot of unexplored avenues in this series, girl, and that's just the long and the short and the short and the long of it. So I'm going to quickly and briefly talk about magic in the whole series because it is a subject which gives me no amount of pleasure. Right, nobody explains magic to us. This is one of my main gripes with the series. Like, you pick up the first book and you're like, oh my god, vampire school, learning how to be a vampire. The vampires are kind of witches, but it's still cool. Like, witch school is cool, like Harry Potter does it and the worst witch, and they're cool. So there's magic and shit. So we're going to be learning how to do spells, we're going to be learning how to harness the power of night, we're going to be learning how to use our affinities. We're not doing any of that. Like, Zoe doesn't attend any lessons, and we don't get to like learn any of like the magical lore, which like drives me insane. That's what we're reading fantasy for. No, like, the only way that we get to learn about magic is through like the practical shit that we see done in the books. And so the way that we learn magic is they cast the circle, right? And then they can do magic in the circle. A couple of books later, Zoe's using magic outside of the circle, like harnessing the power of the elements. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Zoe's this really powerful fledgling and she's got an affinity. So maybe she can use her powers outside of a circle in certain circumstances, like whatever. Like, it's me making excuses for this book. Like, it gets just really confusing. It's just so confusing. Like, sometimes we, like, a circle is now a ritual thing, so it's only if you're doing a ritual spell that you have to cast a circle, and some people can like throw fire at each other and stuff like that, but other people can't. Nobody ever receives training on how to, you know, like expand their powers. It's just like they keep using them and learning them by themselves, which would be fine if we weren't at a vampire school where you learn how to be a vampire. Why are you in the school? What are you doing if you were not learning how to do these things? It's just a mess. There's no magic system. I don't know anything about fantasy. I don't read fantasy a lot, right? But I know about magic systems vaguely, and I know you've got to have one. There's like one where it's like it's got vague rules, like Harry Potter, for example. It's like, as long as you've got a wand and you say a magic word, you can do anything pretty much. But then there's like others where there's like complicated rules to the magic and stuff. But you've got to have something. It can't just be whatever the plot necessitates, right? Which is what this series does, and that's really fucking annoying. It just makes Zoe even more of a Mary Sue, and it just makes everything less high tension because you know that they're always going to pull out some mad little weird power that somebody's got to like defeat the evil they've got to fight. I'm going to do Hunted as well because I've only got short notes for that one, and then hopefully it won't be too long of a video, otherwise I've fucked it, mate. So remember the tunnels where they kidnapped Heath, where the Red Fledglings kidnapped Heath in the second book? We escaped to there after Kelowna's been broken out of the earth. Stevie Ray doesn't die. Eric and Zoe end up getting back together. They just randomly decide to do this. Then Heath shows up and saves Zoe from a Raven Mocker, which is what the invisible like claw things were this whole time. They're now visible for some reason. I think they got like a corporeal form and when their dad got broken out of the earth or whatever, because they're like Kelowna's children, right? They're like weird like bird boy things. The description of them is never very clear. They've got like human eyes but like bird faces, and they've got wings but arms and legs. So I'm not really sure how that all kind of comes together. And this raises questions at first, but it especially raises questions a little bit further down the line. We'll get to those when we get to them, girls and boys. Heath saves Zoe from this Raven Marker, and like I feel like she nearly dies, but she nearly dies a few times throughout the series, and she's obviously not gonna die. It's fucking Zoe Redbird. Nobody's worried. No, nobody cares. In order to like not have Zoe die, she's got to drink blood, and apparently it's better for her if it's like human blood, and Heath is the only human around, so Zoe has to drink from him, so their imprint is re-established. This first little section in the tunnels for me just undoes all of the progress that we've made throughout the course of the series. Like, Eric and Zoe breaking up was an actual event that happened in the course of this fucking mess, and now they're just back together like nothing ever happened, and like Loren wasn't a big deal, and like that whole thing was fucking pointless. Zoe, through cheating, through sleeping with Loren, had broken her imprint with Heath, but now they're re-imprinted. It undermines everything that's happened so far. It just makes it feel like it was pointless reading it because now it's all been undone again. And it's like there's been no progression to the story, and the last few books were absolutely fucking pointless because you realise that you'd moved the story along too quickly, guys. Do you see what I'm trying to say here? They even made Zoe not responsible for the imprint being back on, because I feel like they wanted a reason for Heath to still be in the story, and there's literally no, like, Zoe is so dismissive of him that it would be hard to believe that she would want him there without this bloodlust thing going on between them. So they like exempt her from responsibility by having her like nearly die and have to drink from Heath to survive, so that it's not like, oh, she's gone back on her decision not to get back with Heath and that this imprint being broken was the best thing for them, because that's what Zoe does decide, because Zoe doesn't fucking like Heath, okay? She doesn't want to be with Heath. Just leave Heath alone, he deserves better. Anyway, after all of this abomination of just undoing all of the work that we've done for the whole like last hour, they then go back to the House of Night that they've just escaped from. So even the scene in the tunnels that undoes all of the progress that we've done so far was essentially in the end pointless. Neferet and Kelowna are like this evil duo now, and you would think that this would be an excuse for Neferet to do something as the main villain in this series, but she and Kelowna just spend this book teaching at the House of Nights, and yeah, they've got kind of this weird mind control thing going on over the students because of how beautiful Kelowna apparently is, but they don't actually really do anything all that evil, and I'm unsure how much control Kelowna actually has over this effect that he has on the vampires. So is he really to blame for the hypnosis? I don't know. This whole book is essentially pointless, except to develop Stark's character. I might have appreciated this. I might have appreciated some character development if the character development wasn't so completely fucking atrocious, boys. Let me tell you about it. Stark is like working with Neferet and Kelowna. Obviously, he helped Neferet to resurrect Kelowna. The Red Fledglings have got this weird thing going on where they have to make like a moral choice between good and evil in order to like gain back their humanity that they lost through dying. That's about as in-depth as the book goes into it, so that's about as in-depth as I'm gonna go. He's using his weird red vampire mind control powers to to like mind control the girls at the school to sleep with him, which makes him a big fat dirty R word that we're not gonna say. Like essentially like assaulting this girl called Becca. And we'll talk about Becca later because she's a whole character in this series. Zoe fully like sees this. She sees that he's behaving this way, but she just like knows inside of herself that he can be good. And so like despite all of this like really, really bad creep behavior that Stark is displaying, Zoe just decides to sleep in a bed with him just because she knows he can be good, okay? When they wake up in bed together the next morning, she just like randomly decides to let him swear to be her warrior, which is something that we've not really seen before in the series and that we have to kind of have explained to us on the spot. But essentially he just like swears like this warrior's oath to her, and it means that he's like attached to her forever and he has to protect her and stuff. And there's not necessarily a romantic connection, but obviously these two like Zoe has decided that the two of them are in love, so that's just kind of the way that it goes. Of course it turns out that Zoe was right and that Stark was good all along in the end, even though he assaulted a girl earlier. In deciding to be a warrior, he proves his humanity to Nyx, and he gets to like turn into a full red vampire and run away with Zoe to the Abbey, where the sisters from the Street Cats operation live, and where Zoe made one of the sisters take her grandma when Kelowna broke out of the earth. Grandma who's still like recovering from being attacked and being in intensive care, by the way. There's this whole prophecy thing that doesn't make much sense, and like once they get there, Stark shoots at himself and it drives Kelowna away. So like we just end the book on somebody getting shot by Stark again and possibly dying for a second time. Neferet and Kelowna haven't done anything. They just followed the kids to the Abbey, where they'd only decided to go because they didn't like the fact that the other students were getting mind controlled. It's like the whole book was we started in the tunnels and we went to the House of Night and now we've gone back out of the House of Night, and there was no reason for us to be there in the first place, because while they were there, they did nothing. All we did was go back for Stark. We just went back for Stark. Why did we do that? Why did we stay for him when he was being a complete freak man? What is going on in the House of Commons? This whole book was boring and pointless. Do you want to know the most boring and pointless bit? I hate this. Remember how Stevie Ray drank from Aphrodite like ages ago? I think it was in like the third book or something. So they imprinted. Imprints don't necessarily have to be a romantic thing, as it's been explained to us so far, but we have only seen them in a romantic context. And Stevie Ray and Aphrodite are like really like hard hate each other at this point, and it's a really big hint. It's a really big queer bait that Stevie Ray and Aphrodite are going to end up together at the end of the series. They're going to go like have this enemies to lovers thing because they're connected through this imprint, and they can't help but get to know each other on this deeper level. And it could have been so good, me, but it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. There's jokes about it, and it's like awkward at first, and I suppose it's a little bit humorous, but they can kind of get an idea of what each other are feeling, and this helps the plot in some ways or another. And this imprint is just like a plot convenience for now, and there's no exploration into the feelings side of it. And I just feel like it was just a really sort of missed opportunity for lesbian vampires. That was the only thing that I wanted in this series, and you took it away from me. And Stevie Ray and Aphrodite would have been like the perfect pairing. Like that would have been the one. It was a really good idea, guys. Why didn't you do anything with it? We're going to talk about the handbook. It's at this point in the series that everybody starts mentioning the fledgling handbook that apparently we all got when we started the school. I didn't get one. Zoe didn't get one. She would have mentioned it. She mentions every other stupid little thing about her life, like eating Count Chocula and drinking brown pop. Why wouldn't she tell me if she got a handbook? I feel like it was at this point that they started writing the companion piece to this series, the fledgling handbook, and they wanted to insert it into the narrative in order to, boost sales. But you can't just tell us that everybody got a handbook at the beginning when everybody didn't get a handbook at the beginning, because I remember what happened at the beginning of the book. You don't. I do. I read it. I'm bothered to read it. That's all I got. That's all she wrote me. That's been me. That's been Hunted. That's been Untamed. That's been also another book, I'm pretty sure. But actually chosen or something like that. Titles are completely irrelevant. Just remember that if you're ever writing a book. I'll catch you next time. Fledglings and vampires alike.